Greetings. This is iVideo. My name is John Savers. I'm your host and commentator. This series will continue its series on the protocols of the learned elders of Zion. This rather notorious piece of work, which was fraudulently assigned to Jewry when in fact it issued from segments of Masonry in France during the 20th century, the mid part, I think, and in the first of the series we touched upon the subject, its origins and so forth. We'd like to continue now. So let's pick up with the protocol number 2. It is indispensable for our purpose that war, so far as possible, should not result in territorial gains. War will thus be brought onto the economic ground, where the nations will not fail to perceive in the assistance we give the strength of our predominance. And this state of things will put both sides at the mercy of our international agentur, which possesses millions of eyes ever on the wealth and unhampered by any limitations whatever. Our international rights will then wipe out national rights in the proper sense of right, and will rule the nations precisely as the civil law of states rule the relations of their subjects among themselves. The administrators whom we shall choose from among the public, with strict regard to their capacities for servile obedience, will not be persons trained in the arts of government, and will therefore easily become pawns in our game in the hands of men of learning and genius, who will be their advisors, specialists bred and reared from early childhood to rule the affairs of the whole world. As is well known to you, these specialists of ours have been drawing to fit them for rule the information they need from our political plans, from the lessons of history, from observations made in the events of every moment as it passes. The Goyim are not guided by practical use of unprejudiced historical observation, but by theoretical routine without any critical regard for consequent results. We need not, therefore, take any account of them. Let them amuse themselves until the hour strikes, or live on the hopes of new forms of enterprising pastime, or on the memories of all they have enjoyed. For them, let that play the principal part which we have persuaded them to accept as the dictates of science theory. It is with this object in view that we are constantly, by means of our press, arousing a blind confidence in these theories. The intellectuals of the Goyim will puff themselves up with their knowledge, and without any logical verification of them, will put into effect all the information available from science, which our agentur specialists have cunningly pieced together for the purpose of educating their minds in the direction we want. Do not suppose for a moment that these statements are empty words. Think carefully of the successes we arrange for Darwinism, Marxism, Nietzscheism. To us Jews, at any rate, it should be plain to see what a disintegrating importance these directives have had upon the minds of the Goyim. Once again, we have in the passages in the protocol just mentioned the use of the word Goyim. Now these words must be understood in the Masonic sense of profane. For those of you who may not understand that, I should maybe point out that profane is what Masonry calls non-initiated, the non-Mason. It is indispensable for us to take account of the thoughts, characters, tendencies of the nations in order to avoid making slips in the political and in the direction of administrative affairs. The triumph of our system, of which the component parts of the machinery may be variously disposed according to the temperament of the peoples met on our way, will fail of success if the practical application of it be not based upon a summing up of the lessons of the past in the light of the present. In the hands of the states of today, there's a great force that creates the movement of thought in the people, and that is the press. The part played by the press is to keep pointing out requirements supposed to be indispensable, to give voice to the complaints of the people, to express and to create discontent. It is in the press that the triumph of freedom of speech finds its incarnation. But the Goyim states have not known how to make use of this force, and it has fallen into our hands. Through the press, we have gained the power to influence while remaining ourselves in the shade. Thanks to the press, we have got the gold in our hands, notwithstanding that we have had to gather it out of oceans of blood and tears. But it has paid us, though we have sacrificed many of our people. Each victim on our side is worth, in the sight of God, 1,000 Goyim. Now, once again, we have the use of Goyim, which again I say should be interpreted as profane, the Masonic word profane. Also, we have references to the monarchies toppled. It should be also understood, however, that these are not just monarchies. These typically are non-Grail blood monarchies. In other words, non-Merovingian monarchies. For it appears, as this thing develops, that the authors of this particular piece must have been part of masonry associated with the Priory of Zion and the Merovingian Grail blood claims. For those of you who are not familiar with the Merovingian claims, they claim to be Jews through Jesus, who they claim did not die upon the cross, but who was, with Mary Magdalene, saved and went to southern France, that Mary Magdalene had children by Jesus, and that this particular Davidic line was maintained by the Merovingians, the first Merovingian king being Meravi. The claim, therefore, to be the legitimate king of the Jews, the king of Jerusalem, and so forth, to have this bloodline is made, and therefore the references to Jews and Goyim and so forth have a certain validity if you understand who is talking and their claims, just for the sake of argument, allowing the claims to rest. But it's not something that you would like immediately grasp from reading these things. There's a general idea to misdirection and to misunderstand such things, and I think they pretty much count on that kind of thing also. But anyway, back to the protocols. Today, I may tell you that our goal is now only a few steps off. There remains a small space to cross, and the whole long path we have trodden is ready now to close its cycle of the symbolic snake, by which we symbolize our people. When this ring closes, all the states of Europe will be locked in its coil as in a powerful vise. The constitution scales of these days will shortly break down, for we have established them with a certain lack of accurate balance, in order that they may oscillate incessantly until they wear through the pivot on which they turn. The Goyim are under the impression that they have willed them sufficiently strong, and they have all along kept on expecting that the scales would come into equilibrium. But the pivots, the kings on their thrones, are hemmed in by their representatives who play the fool, distraught with their own uncontrolled and irresponsible power. This power they owe to the terror which has been breathed into the palaces, as they have no means of getting at their people into their very midst. The kings on their thrones are no longer able to come to terms with them, and so strengthen themselves against seekers after power. We have made a gulf between the far-seeing sovereign power and the blind force of the people, so that both have lost all meaning, for like the blind man and his stick, both are powerless apart. In order to incite seekers after power to a misuse of power, we have set all forces in opposition one to another, breaking up their liberal tendencies towards independence. To this end, we have stirred up every form of enterprise. We have armed all parties. We have set up authority as a target for every ambition. Of states, we have made gladiatorial arenas where a host of confused issues contend. A little more, and disorders and bankruptcy will be universal. Babblers inexhaustible have turned into oratorical contests the sittings of Parliament and administrative boards. Bold journalists and unscrupulous pamphleteers daily fall upon executive officials. Abuses of power will put the final touch in preparing all institutions for their overthrow, and everything will fly skyward under the blows of the maddened mob. A caution here. All people are chained down to heavy toil by poverty more firmly than ever they were chained by slavery and serfdom. From these, one way and another, they might free themselves. These could be settled with, but from want, they will never get away. We have included in the Constitution such rights as to the masses appear fictitious and not actual rights. All these so-called people's rights can exist only in idea, an idea which can never be realized in practical life. What is it to the proletariat laborer, bowed double over his heavy toil, crushed by his lot in life, if talkers get the right to babble, if journalists get the right to scribble any nonsense side by side with good stuff? Once the proletariat has no other profit out of the Constitution save only those pitiful crumbs which we fling them from our table in return for their voting in favor of what we dictate, in favor of the men we place in power, the servants of our adjuteur, a Republican rights for a poor man are no more than a bitter piece of irony, for the necessity he is under of toiling almost all day gives him no present use of them, but on the other hand robs him of all guarantees of regular and certain earnings by making him dependent on strikes by his comrades and or lockouts by his masters. The people under our guidance have annihilated the aristocracy, who were their one and only defense and foster mother for the sake of their own advantage, which is inseparably bound up with the well-being of the people. Nowadays, with the destruction of the aristocracy, the people have fallen into the grips of merciless, money-grinding scoundrels who have laid a pitiless and cruel yoke upon the necks of the workers. We appear on the scene as alleged saviors of the worker from this oppression when we propose to him to enter the ranks of our fighting forces, socialists, anarchists, communists, to whom we always give support in accordance with an alleged brotherly rule of the solidarity of all humanity, of our social masonry. The aristocracy, which enjoyed by law the labor of the workers, was interested in seeing that the workers were well fed, healthy, and strong. We are interested in just the opposite, in the diminution, the killing out of the goyim. Our power is in the chronic shortness of food and physical weakness of the worker, because by all that this implies, he is made the slave of our will, and he will not find in his own authorities either strength or energy to set against our will. Hunger creates the right of capital to rule the worker more surely than it was given to the aristocracy by the legal authority of kings. By want and the envy and hatred which it engenders, we shall move the mobs, and with their hands we shall wipe out all those who hinder us on our way. When our strikes for our sovereign Lord of all the world to be crowned, it is these same hands which will sweep away everything that might be. Now, let me interrupt just again to make clear that these expressions, which would tend to mislead and to take a casual observer to assume a connection with Jewry, is in fact connected to Masonry through this Merovingian Grail blood claim of descent from Jesus, and therefore the Davidic line of Israel, and therefore a right to be king of Jerusalem, king of the Jews. And this claim is asserted. Of course, it goes without saying that for a Christian, Such a notion that Jesus sired children by Mary Magdalene is unacceptable and would make a mockery of the entirety of Christianity. I will say parenthetically also that in rock music, such musicians as Jimi Hendrix sang songs during the late 60s and 70s in which this particular Merovingian claim was expounded. Mary Magdalene giving birth to children sired by Jesus. And Jimi Hendrix was just one of a number of rock musicians who acted as kind of propagandizers of this line of thought, or legitimizers. But let us get back to the protocol. The Goyim have lost the habit of thinking unless prompted by the suggestions of our specialists. Therefore, they do not see the urgent necessity of what we, when our kingdom comes, shall adopt at once, namely this, that it is essential to teach in national schools one simple, true piece of knowledge, the basis of all knowledge, the knowledge of the structure of human life, of social existence, which requires division of labor, and consequently the division of men into classes and conditions. It is essential for all to know that owing to difference in the objects of human activity, there cannot be any equality, that he who, by any act of his, compromises a whole class cannot be equally responsible before the law with him who affects no one but only his own honor. The true knowledge of the structure of society, into the secrets of which we do not admit the Goyim, would demonstrate to all men that the positions and work must be kept within a certain circle, that they may not become a source of human suffering arising from an education which does not correspond with the work which individuals are called upon to do. After a thorough study of this knowledge, the people will voluntarily submit to authority and accept such position as is appointed to them in the state. In the present state of knowledge and the direction we have given to its development, the people blindly believing things in print cherishes, thanks to promptings intended to mislead and to its own ignorance, a blind hatred towards all conditions which it considers above itself, for it has no understanding of the meaning of class and condition. This hatred will be still further magnified by the effects of an economic crisis which will stop dealings on the exchanges and bring industry to a standstill. We shall create by all the secret subterranean methods open to us, and with the aid of gold, which is all in our hands, a universal economic crisis whereby we shall throw upon the streets whole mobs of workers simultaneously in all the countries of Europe. These mobs will rush delightedly to shed the blood of those. Once again, I'd like to call to your attention the usage of the word Goyim here has to be connected, understood in the Masonic sense of profane, and does not have a specific connection to Jewry at all. As an aside, a radio program I happened to be watching was a Larry King program shortly after the German government reunification with East Germany, and there was some, this was a radio program, there was some curiosity about how this might work, and would there be a threat to Europe and maybe the world by reunified Germany. And there were two economists on the program, and they were pretty much confident this was not the case. And one of them made the statement to Larry King and to his audience that nowadays countries don't settle things by an army invading, one country's army invading the other, but rather by bankers. So I think bankers might be a sort of a symbolic stand-in for the possession of gold in some sense. But at any rate, back to the protocol. Whom, in the simplicity of their ignorance, they have envied from their cradles, and whose property they will then be able to loot. Ours they will not touch. because the moment of attack will be known to us and we shall take measures to protect our own. We have demonstrated that progress will bring all the goyim to the sovereignty of reason. Our despotism will be precisely that, for it will know how, by wise severities, to pacificate all unrest, to cauterize liberalism out of all institutions. When the populace has seen that all sorts of concessions and indulgences are yielded it in the name of freedom, it has imagined itself to be sovereign lord and has stormed its way to power. But, naturally, like every other blind man, it has come upon a host of stumbling blocks. It has rushed to find a guide. It has never had the sense to return to the former state. And it has laid down its plenipotentiary powers at our feet. Remember the French Revolution, to which it was we who gave the name of Great. The secrets of its preparations are well known to us, for it was wholly the work of our hands. Ever since that time, we have been leading the peoples from one disenchantment to another, so that in the end they should turn also from us in favor of that king despot of the blood of Zion, whom we are preparing for the world. At the present day, we are, as an international force, invincible, because if attacked by some, we are supported by other states. What is the explanation of this phenomenon, this curious inconsequence of the masses of the people in their attitudes toward what would appear to be events of the same order? It is explained by the fact that these dictators whisper to the peoples through their agents that through these abuses they are inflicting injury on the states with the highest purpose, to secure the welfare of the peoples, the international brotherhood of them all, their solidarity and equality of rights. Naturally, they do not tell the peoples that this unification must be accomplished only under our sovereign rule. And thus the people condemn the upright and acquit the guilty, persuaded ever more and more that it can do whatsoever it wishes. Thanks to this state of things, the people are destroying every kind of stability and creating disorders at every step. The word freedom brings out the communities of men to fight against every kind of force, against every kind of authority, even against God and the laws of nature. For this reason, we, when we come into our kingdom, shall have to erase this word from the lexicon of life as implying a principle of brute force which turns mobs into bloodthirsty beasts. These beasts, it is true, fall asleep again every time when they have drunk their fill of blood, and at such times can easily be riveted into their chains. But if they be not given blood, they will not sleep and continue to struggle. So this is the conclusion of the third protocol. Every republic passes through several stages. The first of these is comprised in the early days of mad raging by the blind mob, tossed hither and thither, right and left. The second is demagogy, from which is born anarchy, and that leads inevitably to despotism, not any longer legal and overt, and therefore responsible despotism, but to unseen and secretly hidden, yet nevertheless sensibly felt despotism in the hands of some secret organization or other, whose acts are the more unscrupulous inasmuch as it works behind a screen, behind the backs of all sorts of agents, the changing of whom not only does not injuriously affect, but actually aids the secret force by saving it, thanks to continual changes, from the necessity of expending its resources on the rewarding of long services. Who and what is in a position to overthrow an invisible force? And this is precisely what our force is. Gentile masonry blindly serves as a screen for us in our objects. But the plan of action of our force, even its very abiding place, remains for the whole people an unknown mystery. But even freedom might be harmless and have its place in the state economy without injury to the well-being of the peoples if it rested upon the foundation of faith in God, upon the brotherhood of humanity, unconnected with the conception of equality, which is negatived by the very laws of creation, for they have established subordination. With such a faith as this, a people might be governed by a wardship of parishes and would walk contentedly and humbly under the guiding hand of its spiritual pastor, submitting to the dispositions of God upon earth. This is the reason why it's indispensable for us to undermine all faith, to tear out of the minds of the goyim the very principle of Godhead and the Spirit, and to put in its place arithmetical calculations and material needs. In order to give the goyim no time to think and to take note, their minds must be diverted toward industry and trade. Thus all the nations will be swallowed up in the pursuit of gain, and in the race for it will not take note of their common foe. But again, in order that freedom may once for all disintegrate and ruin the communities of the goyim, we must put industry on a speculative basis. The result of this will be that what is withdrawn from the land by industry will slip through the hands and pass into speculation, that is, to our classes. The intensified struggle for superiority and shocks delivered to economic life will create, nay, have already created, disenchanted, cold, and heartless communities. Then will the hour strike. Solely out of hatred towards the privilege, the lower classes of the goyim will follow our lead against our rivals for power, the intellectuals of the goyim. Now, let me break into, again, talk a little bit about the words found in this protocol. Gentile here, Gentile Masonry, again, points in the direction of that branch of Masonry connected to the Priory of Zion and the Merovingian Grail blood claims. That is, their claims to be Jews of the Davidic line, inherited from their ancestor Jesus, and having been who sired them of Mary Magdalene. This bogus claim, nevertheless, is not considered bogus by them. You know, this is a matter of perspective, so that has to be borne in mind. But naturally, you can understand that it's bogus to me. But they have a different perspective. Now, it is this which allows them to separate themselves from a Masonry which is not connected to the Merovingian Grail blood claims, who are therefore, in a sense, profane also. And I think if you look at it from this perspective, you'll understand that uses of Gentile, it should not, at any rate, be connected to Jewry per se. And this concludes the fourth protocol, and as we have noticed in earlier protocols, there is a strong tendency to try to divide society